Have you ever noticed how respect often dies the moment you stay too long? You give chances, you explain yourself, you forgive until your voice grows hoarse. Yet the more you bend, the less they see you. It's a quiet kind of cruelty, the way patience is mistaken for weakness, and loyalty becomes a discount tag on your soul. I've watched it happen. Good people shrinking themselves, waiting for recognition that never comes. The truth is unsettling. The world doesn't bow to endless kindness. It doesn't salute the one who keeps standing in the fire hoping it will turn warm. It bows to absence, to silence, to the sudden chill when you step away without drama, without pleading, without noise. This isn't about revenge. It's about gravity. When you withdraw your presence, others feel the weight of what they lost. The question is, will you keep giving away your worth, or will you learn the art of walking away? Stay with me and let's explore. As we step into the first chapter, picture yourself walking away without flinching. No slammed doors, no angry speeches, just a calm departure, colder than steel, sharper than any words you could have spoken. And in that moment, the room shifts. Everything rearranges itself around the space you leave behind. Now imagine why absence carries such weight. When you remain always available, you advertise desperation. Each time you accept mistreatment and stay, you write an invisible memo for all to read. My price is negotiable. People may not study philosophy, but they understand supply and demand. Abundance cheapens, scarcity crowns. The more you explain yourself, the more you flood the market. The less you say, the rarer you become. Here's where history nods its head. Machiavelli saw this in the courts of flatterers and traitors. He warned that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. When you linger, they see endurance. When you exit, they feel consequence. Vision fades, but sensation scars, and the shock of your departure leaves an imprint deeper than any plea you ever made. Think of toxic patterns as crude experiments. They hurt you, then they study your reaction. They adjust the dosage, then strike again. Lies grow subtler, insults sharper, silences longer. And if you reply with apologies and paragraphs, you give them license for another round. But one morning, you stop pressing the lever that only delivers pain. You leave the maze. No announcement, no tears, no dramatic unfriending, just stillness, the hush before a storm they never saw coming. Suddenly the scientist becomes the subject, scrambling to decode the missing variable. They refresh your profile. They reread old threads. They wonder if you finally looked in the mirror and realized your own company was enough. At this stage, two paths reveal themselves. In the first, you chase closure. You compose essays about boundaries and wounds. They respond with an emoji, maybe a single letter. Your thoroughness validates their laziness. In the second, you delete the conversation from your heart, if not your phone. The chat bubble stays untouched, like a digital tombstone. And in that silence, the lesson etches itself deeper than words ever could. Here's the Stoic truth buried inside this picture. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. When you withdraw that power from the unworthy, you begin to master the only ground that matters, your own. Walking away is not running, it is reclaiming. It is the refusal to rent out your dignity to those who only squander it. So the first lesson cuts clear. Respect is never bargained through words, nor preserved by lingering. It is carved the moment you leave without flinching. Your absence is not a void, it is dignity condensed, presence sharpened. And as the echo of that silence spreads, it prepares the stage for the next truth. that walking away is never tantrum, but treaty, the redrawing of borders around your sovereignty. Moving into the second chapter, picture the moment when silence is not an outburst, but a treaty. You are not a child storming out of a room. You are a sovereign redrawing the map of your life. Every step away is a line drawn, a border fixed, a declaration that here lies my dignity. And those who cross it will find only echoes, no confrontation, no fire, only the unyielding terrain of your absence. People confuse gentleness with virtue. They mistake endless patience for strength. Yet cruelty aimed at your own worth is still cruelty, silent, invisible, but lethal. To betray yourself by staying where respect has been withdrawn is to inflict the deepest wound upon your own soul. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live. Remaining in places that consume your dignity is not living. It is a slow decay disguised as loyalty." Now imagine the difference between public forgiveness and private forgiveness. Public forgiveness is cheap credit, extended again and again to those who default without hesitation. They borrow your mercy as if it were endless currency, spending it with no intention to repay. Private forgiveness, however, is coin stored beneath the mattress. It is yours to hold, never lent, never lost. It buys your peace. It fuels your departure. Forgive quietly for your own clarity and move forward. Not for them, but for yourself. They will call you stubborn. They will call you cold. Let them. Their names for you are proof that your silence unsettles them. Some will accuse you of being dramatic, of making games of silence. Remember this: anyone who thrived in your confusion will always campaign for its return. Your clarity endangers them. Your distance exposes their need to control, and so they will accuse you of immaturity, of ego, of pride. Decline the invitation to argue. For the moment you explain, you surrender the power that silence granted you. Here's where silence takes on its true form. Silence is not sulking. Silence is strategy. It clears the fog so you can see yourself. It grants you the space to ask the questions you avoided while trapped in noise. Why did I tolerate this? What fracture in my foundation allowed their weight to settle upon me? And as Epictetus urged, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. In answering with honesty, you pour concrete into the cracks. You reinforce what once collapsed. But beware, when they see you unmoved, expect the tricks of return. They will send crumbs of nostalgia, a hey stranger, a photograph from years past, a memory of your birthday, each crumb baked with hope that you will bite. One bite, and the respect you gained evaporates. Do not reach for crumbs. Wait for substance. Patience is your shield. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Patience under the hunger of their absence is your proof. Let them starve. At this stage, boldness must be redefined. Do not mistake noise for boldness. Do not think that volume equates to courage. The boldest act is often withdrawal, for withdrawal demands absolute faith in yourself. You wager everything upon your own self-command. You gamble not with noise, but with stillness. Fortune, Machiavelli once wrote, is a woman who favors the bold. But boldness here is not in raising your voice. It is in refusing to be lured back into a prison you once escaped. And so your absence forces them into one of two states, introspection or madness, sometimes both. If introspection blooms, growth may come, but that is their harvest, not your responsibility. If madness blooms, watch how swiftly affection turns to venom. They will twist narratives, branding you selfish and cold. But that speed unmasks the truth. Their affection was always control in disguise. They did not love your soul. They loved their hold upon it. Now imagine the rare exception. Some relationships, once abandoned, awaken. A friend or a partner may be shocked into clarity, may repair what was broken, may rise. These rare few can be invited back, but only through gates now guarded with codes. Others, however, will stumble about, promising reform only to repeat the old offense. Remember, a promise costs them nothing, but believing that promise invoices your peace. Debt collectors do not fall for sweet talk. Neither should you. And then there is the chorus of onlookers, the colleagues, the relatives, the so-called friends. They will speak as though they know. They will assign blame upon headlines, not histories. Let them talk. Their voices build nothing. Reputation built on rumor is a sandcastle waiting for tide. You are building fortresses inland, and seasons have a way of sifting storytellers. In time, the tide erases their words, but your foundation stands. From here, take this final truth of the second chapter. Walking away is not a tantrum. It is not the gesture of a wounded child. It is the treaty of a sovereign reclaiming borders. Every step into distance redraws the map of your life. Every refusal to argue secures your throne, and every silent mile you walk becomes proof that you will never again lease your dignity to those who squander it. The first chapter taught us that absence burns deeper than words. This second chapter teaches us that silence is not weakness, but strategy. And as we step into the third, we will enter the fortress itself, where the energy once wasted on confusion is turned toward mastery, and where solitude becomes the training ground of unshakable strength. Advancing to the third chapter, let us step inside the fortress you are building. It is not a fortress of stone, though stone would envy its endurance. It is a fortress of practice, a fortress of ritual. Within these walls, the chaos of betrayal is exchanged for the order of mastery. The hours once wasted decoding riddles and mixed signals are now reclaimed, poured back into the soil of your own becoming. You invest not in their moods, but in your body, your craft, your spirit. And in this investment you discover what you should have known all along. Energy is not lost, only misplaced. When retrieved, it fuels transformation. Picture this. They return months later, curious, scrolling through your life as if checking a weather report. They expect cryptic laments, subtle complaints, a performance of grief. They find none, no subtweets, no hidden cries, only the steady silence of someone who has chosen to build rather than beg. And that silence wounds them more deeply than any direct insult. It is proof that you are always capable of thriving without them. Your growth unmasks their irrelevance. Marcus Aurelius gave us a reminder sharp enough to cut through centuries. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. You no longer argue your worth. You no longer litigate your value in the noisy courts of opinion. You live it. You embody it. Value demonstrated is irrefutable. Value debated is discounted. Critics will whisper. They always do. Isn't this pride? They ask. And you can answer without hesitation. Yes, it is pride. But not the fragile kind that crumbles under pressure. It is the pride of knowing the market price of your own soul and refusing to sell it at clearance. To walk with such pride is not arrogance, it is reverence for the gift of your own existence. False humility is a discount sign hung around your neck, and predators, sensing weakness, move quickly when they see such a sign. Now imagine the energy of parasites once feeding on your silence. They treated you like a source of unending Wi-Fi, connecting when they needed, draining when they desired, and walking away when their appetite was filled. With your absence, their connection breaks. They scramble, searching for another hotspot, and eventually they realize the truth. They were never the power. They were only borrowers. You were the source. You were the router, not the user. And by the time they understand, you are broadcasting on a private network, closed to the unworthy. Machiavelli, often remembered for cruelty, offered a subtler lesson here. A ruler must choose allies carefully. The wise prince avoids flatterers who, under the guise of admiration, seek only their own advantage. Translate that into your life. The cheerleader waving pom-poms may secretly be the pickpocket with hands deep in your pockets. The applause may be camouflage for extraction. Be careful. Walk away early, walk away often, and walk far from arenas where the roar intoxicates more than the results justify. From here, solitude takes on its sharper edge. Exit is not exile. Solitude is not punishment. It is refinement. Diamonds are not shaped in crowded marketplaces. They are formed in obscurity, beneath pressure, in silence. Work in shadows until your shine blinds doubt itself. When you return, if you choose to return, you do not arrive as a refugee seeking shelter. You arrive as an independent state, treaties in hand, prepared to engage on terms of parity. If they break the new accords, history repeats. But this time, you depart faster, because practice breeds efficiency. At this stage, distance itself evolves into reflex. The first walk away feels like tearing ligaments. It hurts. It stretches you beyond what you thought you could endure. The second feels like a cautious jog, easier but still tender. Eventually, though, you sprint. The moment toxicity leaks through the door, you are gone, not out of fear, but instinct. Distance ceases to be strategy. It becomes survival, and here is a truth often missed. Distance does not mean frozen emotion. You can love someone and still leave them. You can cherish memories and still evacuate the minefield. Stoicism does not ask you to become stone. It asks you to remember that feelings inform, but choices define. Love is a flame. Boundaries are the hearth. Without boundaries, the flame consumes everything. With them, the flame warms without destroying. Let me tell you of a man who lived this truth. He loved his companions, but their laughter came with daggers. Each jest cut deeper than it seemed. For years, he defended them to himself, explaining that love required patience, loyalty, endurance. But one morning, he realized that love without boundaries had become servitude. He walked. Not because he stopped loving, but because he chose to preserve the part of himself that could still love truly. The memories remained, but he would not continue the performance of suffering disguised as devotion. In leaving, he discovered the difference between love as feeling and love as slavery. Seneca wrote, "A man is as unhappy as he has convinced himself he is. To remain where you are diminished is to convince yourself unhappiness is noble. It is not. It is corrosion of the soul. Better to leave with dignity than to stay and crumble." This is where the third lesson settles into the heart. Build your fortress. Fill it with rituals that sharpen you, reading at dawn, gratitude at dusk, training your body to endure, training your mind to think clearly. Do not wait for applause. Applause is cheap. Applause fades. But steady work builds a brightness even doubt cannot dim. And as you close the gate behind you, remember this. The fortress is not meant to keep you locked in. It is meant to ensure that when you step out again, you walk as a sovereign, not as a beggar. So the third chapter closes with clarity. Walking away is not escape, it is preparation. It is the quiet labor that makes you unassailable. From here we turn to the next chapter, where sovereignty is secured not by attack, but by making disrespect itself unprofitable. Entering the fourth chapter, imagine yourself standing before a gate you built with your own hands. On one side lies the noise of old offenses, on the other lies the ground you have reclaimed. The air is sharp with clarity. You understand now that survival is not about attacking enemies, but about making disrespect unprofitable. A fortress does not spend its days firing arrows. It simply stands so impenetrable that invaders quit before they ever climb the wall. Here's where the wisdom turns practical. Machiavelli once observed that men rise from one ambition to another, first to secure themselves against attack, then to attack others. Reverse it. The Stoic does not thirst for conquest. The Stoic secures his peace by removing every incentive for others to trespass. You need not raise your voice. You need not retaliate. You build a life where exploitation cannot gain entry. And when disrespect finds no purchase, it withers. Now imagine the power of standards. The world adjusts not to your speeches, but to your boundaries. Your silence becomes the law, your absence the verdict. Words can be twisted, but a closed gate cannot. When you finally walk, do it once. Do it clean. Do it without glancing over your shoulder. Every backward glance is an opening for negotiation. Every step forward is a treaty signed with yourself. Respect is not a plea. It is a standard enforced. I recall a man who endured endless belittling at his workplace. He explained, he pleaded, he even tried to educate his mockers. Nothing changed. But when he quietly resigned, when he withdrew his presence, the mocking stopped overnight. His absence cost them competence. His silence cut sharper than any lecture, and in his new role elsewhere, he thrived. The old company learned too late that mockery brings loss, not loyalty. This is where silence echoes louder than sermons. Seneca warned, "A man is not disturbed by events, but by the view he takes of them." When you treat insult as mere wind, you strip it of its sting. But when you turn that same indifference into action, into withdrawal, you demonstrate that your dignity is beyond their reach. Your fortress teaches without words. I will not be your entertainment, nor your easy target. You cannot profit from my presence if my presence is withdrawn. Let's step deeper into the paradox of power. The one who shouts for respect rarely receives it. The one who quietly refuses disrespect receives more than he ever asked. Standards enforced by silence carve authority into the atmosphere. People may resist your words. They cannot resist your absence. You leave, and suddenly they feel the hollow space where your steadiness once stood. The lesson stings. Not because you punished them, but because they punished themselves by failing to honor what was in front of them. From here, the principle expands to every corner of life. Guard your focus. Withdraw from noise. Refine your craft. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you are laying bricks in your fortress. Each brick makes you harder to exploit. Each wall teaches others the futility of disrespect. You become the standard. You no longer beg the world to change. You enforce change by the way you live. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And so you build quietly, you grow steadily, and you let your existence be the rebuke. At this stage, respect follows the imprint of your departure. Imagine an army arriving too late to claim victory. They march in vain across empty ground because you have already advanced far beyond them. That is the image of a life lived by standard, not by speech. You walk away once, firmly, and the echo of that step reverberates longer than 1,000 apologies. Here lies the heart of the fourth lesson. The world bows not to declarations, but to dignity, not to arguments, but to absence. Not to force, but to standards lived so consistently that disrespect dies at your gate. You need not fight, you need not beg, you need only stand where no compromise is permitted. And as this chapter closes, a new path opens. The next truth waits, that in the wake of such withdrawal, energy returns. What once drained you becomes fuel, what once exhausted you becomes strength. And from that strength, the next frontier of freedom begins. Moving into the fifth chapter, picture the weight lifting from your shoulders. The fatigue that clung to you like wet clothes begins to evaporate. For years you thought exhaustion was born of workload, of endless tasks, of duties piled higher than your strength. But then you left the room where respect was absent, and suddenly your energy returned like a tide rushing back to shore. It was never the labor that drained you. It was the slow leak of dignity. Without it, every effort feels heavier than stone. With it restored, even burdens feel lighter. Now imagine waking up to a quiet morning, no messages demanding explanations, no drafts of rebuttals rehearsed in your head. You pour your coffee and hear, perhaps for the first time in years, the sound of your own steady breath. The mind that once burned with overthinking now rests in what the ancients called euthymia, the state of cheerful steadiness. Seneca spoke of this as the prize state, rare and more precious than gold. And in this steadiness, you discover something shocking. Life does not demand endless reaction. It rewards deliberate response. Here's where the Stoic discipline shows itself. In an age addicted to outrage, everyone performs anger like a street vendor hawking wares. Rage has become currency, traded for attention, traded for clout. But your refusal unsettles them. You do not buy their chaos. You no longer audition for their approval. And that refusal bruises egos more than confrontation ever could. Nothing rattles a performer more than an empty seat. Nothing shakes a tempter more than your silence. Let me tell you a story. A woman once told me that after years of being tethered to a circle of critics, she finally walked. At first, she feared loneliness, but then she noticed her body healing, her mind clearing. She slept through the night without playing court cases in her dreams. She woke lighter, and she began to study again, to learn languages, to run in the morning, to write in the evenings. Her growth startled those who once mocked her. They returned, cloaked in false curiosity, heard you launched a business, saw you've been traveling. Impressive change. But their admiration was not genuine, it was scavenging. They were searching for proof that she remained reachable. She offered none. Excellence became her wall, and from outside that wall they could only admire. From here the lesson grows sharper. Achievement attracts opportunists. Some arrive in polished armor, smiling, carrying compliments instead of swords. But the Stoic watches carefully. Epictetus warned, "Be wary of those who praise you, for often they seek their own advantage. If praise outpaces contribution, you have met a mercenary in disguise. True allies invest first, speak second. The dependable do not flatter, they act. And so you test quietly. You give trust in slivers, never the whole loaf. Courtesy is maintained, but sovereignty is never surrendered. This is where ritual becomes your crown. Frame your mornings like a monarch surveying his realm. Audit your emotions. Ask, what resentment still lingers? Each one is an unpaid invoice. Collect it through self-care, not confrontation. Train your body. Resistance reminds the mind that strength is born under load. Review your finances, the bloodstream of autonomy. Study strategy, for history's battlefields are guides to daily life. And at night, record victories, however small. Those who chronicle their days rule their decades. The Stoics knew that discipline is not death, it is life renewed. Detachment does not kill passion, it clears away weeds, so true passion may grow. What once felt like fatigue becomes energy. What once felt like chaos becomes clarity. And when clarity arrives, growth accelerates. Learning becomes addictive because progress obeys you, unlike people. Now imagine yourself months into this path. Your body stronger, your mind sharper, your spirit calmer. And those who once drained you notice too late. They circle back, peering through the gates of your fortress, knocking with casual greetings. Hey stranger, we miss you. Things are different now, but you know better. They are not admiring your strength. They are scouting for access. Offer none. Excellence is your wall. Distance is your shield. At this stage, the truth crystallizes. Energy was never the enemy. Work was never the thief. The true thief was the absence of respect. And once that door closed, energy poured back like water returning to its rightful channel. And so the 5th chapter concludes with one clear lesson. Walk away and watch fatigue fall from your back. The silence you once feared becomes the soil of growth. From this strength, the next horizon emerges, where whispers of gossip surround you, yet your identity remains yours alone, untouchable and unbent. Entering the 6th chapter, listen to the whispers that follow your absence. They no longer see you, so they invent you. One says you are cold, another claims you are hiding heartbreak. Rumors multiply like vines in the dark, but you do not correct them. A lion does not issue press releases. Truth, in its purest form, is software installed only on authorized minds. The rest see scrambled signals. Let them. What matters is not their version of you, but the one you carry within. Now imagine this danger, solitude tipping into arrogance. There is a risk when you walk away that your distance hardens into disdain. Marcus Aurelius warned himself, enter their minds and you will find the same weakness. Even manipulators are frightened children wearing elaborate masks. Recognize that truth, not to excuse them, but to guard yourself against pride. Compassion without boundaries is ruin, but boundaries without compassion curdle into cruelty. Hold both in balance. Forgive when you choose, but never reopen the gates. Here's where their counterattacks begin. Re-entry attempts always follow a predictable arc. First, nostalgia bombs, the shared joke, the old playlist, the cafe where you once dreamed aloud together. If that fails, guilt grenades. Real friends don't vanish. You've changed. We needed you. Should guilt miss, the rage rockets launch. So you think you're better than us. Each phase is bait. Each phase aims for empathy, but you are no longer the same. You raise the Stoic shields, perception, purpose, preparation. You observe the emotion rising, but you do not act upon it. You recall your mission. You remember you foresaw this very tactic on the day you left. At this stage, the names arrive. Ruthless, cold, selfish. Wear the title with steadiness. Ruthless, in its truest sense, means without compassion for what destroys you. And that is no insult. That is armor. Machiavelli praised rulers who severed liabilities promptly. Delay costs kingdoms, delay costs lives. You amputated the gangrene before it reached your heart. That is not cruelty, that is triage. Now picture the circle that remains, smaller but denser. Fewer voices, richer dialogue, the echo of chaos replaced by the hum of collective growth. Colleagues who build, not belittle. Friends who reveal blind spots with care, not scorn. Mentors who appear because you now stand where mentors roam, in the arena of action, not the hallway of complaint. And in this smaller circle, you finally breathe clean air. Here's a scene to carry. One evening you catch your reflection in a window. You pause, shoulders open, gaze steady. Confidence crept in like dawn, so gradual you hardly noticed until now. It is not bravado, it is the physical form of uncompromising standards. Predators sense it and turn away. Manipulators lose their appetite. You are no longer prey. You are no longer available to be consumed. You have become magnetic to those who elevate, unpalatable to those who exploit. The Stoics would call this the fruit of discipline. Epictetus reminded his students, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery begins when you stop letting others script your role. Mastery deepens when you leave the stage of their drama altogether. And mastery flowers when your presence, sharpened by silence, bends the atmosphere around you without a single word. From here, the message is simple but fierce. Let them whisper. Let them invent. Let them brand you ruthless. The world will always weave stories, but your task is not to edit their tales. Your task is to live yours with clarity. Withdraw from noise. Stand in silence. Guard your circle. Build your standards. And remember, what they call ruthless is often nothing more than the courage to walk away. So the 6th chapter closes with a sharpened truth. When you amputate what rots, you save the body. When you sever what corrodes, you save the soul. The circle shrinks, but the dialogue deepens, the posture changes, and the predators scatter. From here we move forward to the 7th lesson, where the magnetism of quiet competence reveals itself as the strongest pull of all. Advancing to the 7th chapter, step into the stillness where competence whispers louder than any proclamation. It is not the loud who command attention. It is not the boastful who bend fortune. The strongest magnetism is quiet competence, the kind that builds slowly layer by layer, until one day others feel its pull without understanding why. Machiavelli called it virtù, effectiveness fused with resilience, and the Stoics would recognize it as excellence joined with steadiness, the calm discipline that bends fate itself toward preparation. Now imagine fortune as a river. In calm weather, you build dikes and channels. You rise before dawn. You train your body. You sharpen your mind. You invest in your craft. You bow your head in gratitude at twilight. You retreat into solitude each week. You review each season. These are the dikes. These are the banks that shape the flood into opportunity instead of destruction. Routine, in truth, is destiny. To ignore it is to leave yourself to drowning. To embrace it is to transform chaos into harvest. Here's where temptation creeps in. As your destiny begins to shift, you feel the urge to announce your rise, to broadcast your victories as proof that leaving was justified. Resist it. Broadcasting is wasted fire. It burns energy and invites sabotage. Let results leak quietly. Rumors travel faster than declarations. The less you reveal, the more unsettling your progress becomes. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best way of avenging yourself is not to become like the wrongdoer. Your life itself becomes the answer. Picture the effect of silence. A silent ascent unnerves watchers. They have no target to strike, no flaw to exploit. They whisper, they speculate, but they cannot touch. Silence is not secrecy. You are not hiding, you are influencing more deeply than ever. Each day of excellence plants an uncomfortable question in the hearts of others. If they could grow after leaving, what am I still tolerating? Without a single sermon, you become a lighthouse. The beam exposes reefs of codependency. Some curse the glare. A few steer safely and thank you. That is influence measured not in likes, but in liberated lives. From here, freedom widens the horizon. Respect or reject. This is your new valuation model. If an offer requires you to shrink your standards, it is a hidden tax. Decline it. Walk away from cages disguised as opportunities. Opportunity that demands you carve off pieces of yourself is not opportunity at all. It is shackles wrapped in velvet. The Stoic does not confuse adornment with virtue. Seneca reminded us, nothing is worth doing pointlessly. What good is success if it costs you the self you fought so hard to reclaim? Now imagine the nights when loneliness whispers. You sit in your fortress and the question rises, was this isolation worth it? On birthdays, on sleepless nights, when memories flicker, the urge to reach out burns. Breathe, inhale the quiet. Ask one question, will this restore or relive? Most answers reveal themselves as reliving. Nostalgia is history's basement. It stores nothing of healing, only relics of fantasy. Relapse is regression. Stand still in the discomfort. For solitude is not a sentence, it is a sanctuary, a room large enough to host your highest potential. At this stage, you carry lighter, forgiveness without reunion, distance without bitterness. From this higher ground, resentment becomes too heavy to haul. You set it down, not for them, but for traction. You walk faster, lighter. Memory itself becomes your sentry, warning you at every new gate. Bitterness can retire, progress can advance, and in that advance, projects blossom, finances grow, mentors notice your calm intensity. Here's the paradox that will confound the world. They will mistake your calm intensity for luck. They will see your steady progress and call it fortune, but you know better. Luck is location. You moved from chaos to competence, and fortune visits where competence resides. The discipline of preparation invites the river of fortune to flow through your channels. This is not luck, it is alignment with nature's order. And then, as predictable as the eclipse, the message comes. The first offender writes, "Can we talk? I miss how you understood me." But your heartbeat stays steady. They do not miss you. They miss the version of you that sacrificed itself. They miss the one who endured, not the one who survived. Replying would reopen a negotiation already closed, and so you let the notification fade. Some stories find closure only in unanswered endings. So the 7th chapter closes with a flame that does not boast, but burns steady. Quiet competence is the most powerful force of all. It bends fortune, it unsettles enemies, it inspires allies. It is preparation disguised as destiny. And as we move into the next chapter, we discover the deeper rhythm that those who master the dawn eventually master the years. For mornings are the forge where a life of unshakable strength is hammered into shape. Entering the 8th chapter, imagine the world still sleeping while you rise before dawn. The city is hushed, the streets are empty, the air is sharp, almost sacred. You stand awake, not to prove anything to anyone, but because dawn has become your ally. In the silence before the quarrels of the day, you hear secrets no crowd can overhear. Whoever masters mornings, masters years. Now imagine this rhythm. The sun is still climbing, yet your mind is already marching. By the time others are tangled in their first argument, you are equipped and untroubled. An iron gate has closed against pettiness. The weight of past noise cannot breach it. Your momentum is peaceful, but it is also relentless. The day bends toward you because you met it early, on your own terms. Here's where reflection returns with clarity. You look back at the pleas you once delivered and realize they were loans extended to debtors who never intended repayment. Every apology, every long defense was credit handed to the unworthy. Now those moments are no longer painful, they are educational. Like scars on a warrior's skin, they remind you where the blade slipped. You do not lament the cut. You learn the technique that prevents it from striking again. Seneca taught, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Each scar is proof of polishing. Let me give you an image. You are no longer a banker handing out emotional loans. You are an investor, weighing intention as much as outcome. New opportunities arrive, dressed in polished smiles, but you no longer judge by surface. You hold them to the flame of principle. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that words without deeds are smoke. So you wait, you measure, you accept only when honor and purpose align. From here, accusations drift like wind. A rumor wafts back. Someone from the old circle calls you a phantom, unreachable, aloof. But instead of pain, the words please you. For what is aloofness but distance? And what is distance but protection? People cannot haunt a house whose doors are locked, whose owner no longer resides there. You moved. You left forwarding instructions only to those who could honor them. The rest can knock upon an empty room. Now imagine the new companions you gather. They are not many, but they are light and tensile, like ropes that bend without breaking. A coffee with a thinker sparks new insight. Sparring in the gym strengthens not only muscle, but grit. A silent hike with a trusted friend restores humility beneath the vast, impartial sky. These bonds are not anchored in neediness. They are anchored in mutual elevation. Respect flows in quiet exchanges, not in grand performances. Here's the paradox Stoicism reveals. Solitude is not stubborn isolation, it is refinement. To be alone does not mean to be abandoned. It means you are giving room for your highest self to emerge. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Let others misinterpret your distance. They see emptiness, you are building abundance. They see exile, you are shaping mastery." At this stage, you notice something subtle. The ache that once clung to you like a shadow begins to dissolve. You no longer long for applause, nor dread their silence. Your fortress is no prison, it is training ground. Within it, you test yourself daily, sharpening blade and spirit alike. And slowly, the discipline you forged in solitude begins to radiate outward. Strangers notice gravitas in your presence. They cannot name it, but they feel it. True authority radiates silently, like gravity. It does not announce. It shapes the space around it. So the 8th chapter closes with a truth carved by mornings. Whoever wakes before the noise commands the day. Whoever commands the day commands the years. And whoever commands the years commands the legacy they will leave behind. Solitude, discipline, and reflection are not punishments. They are the very tools that carve a life beyond reach of pettiness. From here we step forward into the 9th chapter, where even old aches return to test you and setbacks strike with force. Yet the fortress you have built absorbs the shock, and detachment blossoms into creative liberty. At this stage, let us step into the 9th chapter, where the old ache sometimes returns like an echo through empty halls. It does not roar, it whispers. On certain evenings the thought creeps in. Perhaps I left too severely. The mind replays old laughter, softens sharp edges of memory, and, for a moment, the fortress feels too quiet. But you sit with it. You do not run. You trace the outline of the ache without judgment, as a Stoic examines a scar. Pain, after all, is not prophecy. It is information. Once acknowledged, it dissolves like breath fading from glass, leaving behind a clarity through which you see tomorrow's tasks. Now imagine this ritual. Before sleep, you conduct self-interrogation. You sweep away emotional residue like dust before it molds into regret. What did I give too freely? What strength did I guard well? This ritual is not punishment, it is cleansing. And as you repeat it, progress accelerates, doubt recedes, ventures mature, creative projects gain traction. Even the body shifts. What once felt like exertion now feels like celebration. Effort becomes joy, not burden. Here's where presence transforms. Strangers begin to perceive gravitas in you, not because you boast, but because you no longer need to. Authority that requires announcement is brittle. Real authority radiates silently, like gravity, shaping everything around it without visible effort. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The best way to defend yourself is not to mirror the wrong. Your steadiness is defense enough, but life will test your fortress. An unforeseen loss strikes, a deal collapses, a loved one falls ill. A storm floods the careful plans you built. Once you might have scrambled for reassurance, searching in fickle places. Now you turn inward, consulting the counsel of principles etched through seasons of distance. The setback stings, yes, but it does not unmake you. Like seasoned oak bending in fierce wind, you flex but do not break. Let's step deeper. Detachment has now evolved into creative liberty. You no longer seek validation before acting. You launch ideas boldly, knowing some may fail. But failure no longer feels fatal. It feels like data. Each stumble becomes a footnote in your growth. Critics still lurk, but their voices reach you muffled, passing through layers of earned indifference. Their judgments bounce off a surface polished by resilience and coated with purpose. Here's a picture of forgiveness from this height. You look back at those who once injured you. They appear less like villains now, more like travelers lost in their own fog. You grant them distance. You grant them anonymity in your memory. Not because they deserve absolution, but because dragging their shadows forward would dim your horizon. Let them wander. You are building tomorrow. Now imagine the gift of leadership rising from this ground. Opportunities appear, and you accept selectively. You remember what it felt like to be lost among lesser company, and so you mentor emerging minds. You teach that sovereignty begins with treaties signed with oneself, rules you enforce without spectacle. Some will listen, and those few may surpass even your accomplishments. Their ascent will be proof that walking away was not only survival, but strategy. From here, influence reaches its highest form, influence strongest at the source, not scattered in endless persuasion. You live your principles, and the living of them shapes the atmosphere around you more than any argument could. This is the Stoic way, not to convince, but to embody. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In your stride, in your calm, in your choices, you embody." And so the 9th chapter closes with quiet triumph. Completion of this long journey does not feel like victory parades. It feels like opening yet another gate. Beyond lies further territory, lands of mastery and meaning invisible, while you labored to escape the quicksand of disrespect. You tighten your laces, adjust your pack, and stride onward, comforted by one enduring realization. The distance you once feared to create became the very bridge to everything you now cherish. And as you cross it, you know respect is born not when you demand it, but when you walk away and stay gone. From here, we turn toward the horizon, where new frontiers wait. Proof that the journey of sovereignty never ends, only deepens. You've walked the long road of distance, each step carving respect where none was given, each silence teaching louder than any speech. But the journey does not end at the gate you closed. Leaving was only the beginning. What comes after absence is the shaping of a new presence. The question shifts. Once you are free from their grasp, what do you build with the strength you reclaimed? This is where survival turns into mastery, where silence becomes not just a shield, but a workshop, and where the life ahead is no longer defined by what you escaped, but by what you now create. Now we turn to the lessons born in this silence, where transformation begins the moment explanations end. You walked away not just to escape them, but to encounter yourself. Silence, once heavy, becomes a crucible. It burns away excuses. It melts the old alloy of compromise. And in its heat, something harder, something purer, begins to take shape. Now imagine the man who leaves a noisy hall. At first, the silence deafens him. He misses the chatter, even the insults. But as days turn into weeks, the stillness becomes fertile. He reads again. He trains. He feels strength return to limbs that once trembled beneath the weight of constant concession. In time, he no longer misses the noise. He wonders why he endured it so long. This is the paradox. The very space you feared becomes the workshop where the self you sought is forged. Here's where Stoicism steps forward with its quiet hand. Marcus Aurelius urged, "Withdraw into yourself." The rational soul is its own refuge. Your absence is not exile, it is refuge, it is sanctuary. You are not hiding, you are rebuilding. The fortress you constructed in Part A was not the end, it was the foundation. Now within those walls, transformation begins. From here, discipline changes shape. Once it was survival, closing gates, refusing disrespect. Now it becomes creation. You rise earlier, not from fear of insult, but from joy in mastery. The dawn no longer feels like a shield. It feels like an ally. You no longer measure your worth against their neglect. You measure it by the weight you lift, the lines you write, the skills you sharpen, the promises you keep to yourself. Respect from others fades into irrelevance because self-respect has taken the throne. Picture the shift in the eyes of strangers. They do not know your history. They never saw you beg. They never heard your explanations. All they see is the presence you now carry, the calm intensity, the steadiness of one who governs himself. Authority radiates, not because you chase it, but because you embody it. Seneca wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." That power is no longer theory. It is etched into your stance, your words, your silence. Let me tell you a story. A woman left a circle that belittled her ambition. At first, the nights were lonely. She longed to prove they were wrong. But instead of rushing back, she poured herself into study. She built a small business from her kitchen table. She trained her body until strength replaced weariness. A year later, those who mocked her whispered about her rise. But by then, their whispers meant nothing. She had already risen above the need for their recognition. Her silence, her distance, became her declaration. Here's the lesson hammered home. Walking away is not the finish line, it is the starting gate. It is the moment where you shift from survival to sovereignty, from proving yourself to others, to proving yourself to yourself, from craving applause to crafting excellence. At this stage, resilience transforms into vision. No longer are you merely defending borders. You are expanding territory within your mind, your craft, your spirit. The absence that once unsettled you has become your greatest ally. You realize now that freedom is not the absence of people, it is the presence of purpose, and purpose, once lit, does not need applause to burn. And so the truth stands firm. Transformation is born the moment you stop explaining, stop begging, stop proving. You walked away, and in that silence you discovered the workshop of self. What others called loss was only the clearing of ground, and in that clearing you planted seeds no storm could ever uproot. From here, the path turns toward a deeper lesson, how sovereignty ripens into strategy, and how a life rebuilt in silence becomes a force that shapes far more than yourself. Moving into the next lesson, picture a throne left empty until you chose to sit upon it. For years, you let others dictate your steps, their moods deciding your worth. But once you walked away, sovereignty no longer meant survival, it meant strategy. You were not just protecting boundaries, you were learning how to command the course of your own life. Now, imagine a map spread before you. Each choice redraws borders. Each refusal to compromise strengthens the walls. You begin to see that respect is not demanded in words, but enforced in the way you govern yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Strength, then, is no longer reaction. It is design. It is arranging your days so that no insult, no betrayal can drain the energy meant for your purpose. Here's where the change deepens. You stop seeking applause. You stop explaining decisions. You act with quiet precision. The man who rises early to train, the woman who invests in her craft instead of arguments, these are rulers of their own empires. Their sovereignty is not loud, but it is unshakable. And the world adjusts, not because they ask it to, but because standards bend reality around them. Let me give you a story. A craftsman once told me how he lost everything: friends, money, even his reputation. For months he tried to justify himself. No one listened. So one day he stopped speaking and started working. He built quietly, repairing furniture in his garage, taking small orders, delivering without fanfare. Years passed. His skill grew into mastery. People who once mocked him now sought his service. He smiled, but wasted no breath on explanations. His sovereignty matured into strategy. His life itself became his argument. From here, patience becomes your strongest weapon. Others bait you with provocations. They seek debate. They crave the stage of your energy. But you decline the invitation. Silence is not retreat. It is calculation. Every ounce of energy withheld from argument is energy invested in construction. Seneca reminded us, "He who is brave is free." And bravery is found not in striking back, but in refusing to be drawn into battles unworthy of your time. At this stage, you begin to notice the shift in gravity. People approach differently. The ones who once dismissed you now tread carefully. They sense the unspoken line, "Respect me," or "Step aside." You do not say it, yet it is heard. Sovereignty has matured into strategy, and strategy speaks louder than sermons. So the lesson is clear. Leaving was survival. but what you build afterward is rule. To live with dignity is to turn your absence into authority, your silence into law, your daily discipline into command. And the more faithfully you live by these standards, the less you need to explain them. And from here, the path opens to another truth. When sovereignty steadies your hand, your life ceases to be only about protection. It becomes an instrument that shapes, influences, and elevates more than yourself. Advancing to the next lesson, picture the moment when your silence no longer serves only you, but begins to shape the air around others. You did not intend to become an example, yet your absence, your steadiness, your refusal to bend, these things ripple outward. People notice, they feel the shift, and without speeches, without announcements, you start to influence more lives than you ever did while you were explaining yourself. Now imagine someone watching you from afar. They once laughed at your distance. They once whispered you were arrogant, unreachable. But months later, they see the calm you carry, the projects that thrive, the strength that grows in quiet. And in their own private reflection, they wonder, if they can rise after leaving, why am I still kneeling where I stand? Your presence becomes a mirror, not by force, but by example. You become proof that respect is found not in pleading, but in walking. Here's where Stoic philosophy breathes into the story. Epictetus reminded his students, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. When you embody principle, you teach without words. Your daily discipline, reading, training, gratitude, stillness, becomes a living sermon. Those who truly wish to grow will see and learn. Those who wish to mock will sneer, but their sneer cannot erase the lesson. Authority built on silence lasts longer than arguments shouted into the wind. Let me share a story. A man left a circle that drained him. At first, his silence was mocked, but he focused on his craft, on small rituals that built him into someone stronger, calmer. Years later, one of those who had mocked him came quietly and asked for guidance. Why? Because he had seen results. Not noise, not retaliation, results. And in that moment, the man realized something profound. His greatest influence had not come through his words, but through his refusal to waste them. From here, influence takes on a new form. You are no longer entangled in persuasion. You do not chase people down hallways trying to justify yourself. You live, and your life bends the perception of others. Seneca said, long is the road through precepts, but short and effective through examples. Your silence shortens the road for others. It shows them what endurance looks like when it matures into creation. At this stage, your sovereignty begins to inspire beyond your circle. Colleagues notice the steadiness you carry into storms. Friends admire the clarity you hold in dilemmas. Even strangers feel the gravity in your demeanor. And though you never asked to lead, leadership begins to form around you, not through titles or declarations, but through respect quietly earned. So the lesson sharpens. The life you rebuild in silence does not remain only yours. It becomes a signal fire, guiding others through their own fog. Without intending, you shape more than yourself. You shape the path of anyone willing to observe. And as this chapter closes, a question rises. If your silent strength already inspires those around you, what more might it do when tested by storm, when life itself brings trials meant to shake even the steadiest? That is where the next truth waits. From here, let us step into the closing lesson of this journey. You have walked away, you have rebuilt, you have carried silence like armor and lit it like a torch. But now comes the hardest test, understanding that the path was never only about escape, it was about creation. What began as survival must mature into contribution. Now imagine a field cleared after a long fire. Blackened earth, charred remains, silence heavy in the air. At first glance, it looks ruined. Yet in time, shoots of green push through the ash. That is your life after departure. The clearing that seemed barren is now the most fertile ground. The energy once wasted on arguments and explanations flows into vision, into work, into growth. The absence that once hurt now breathes possibility. Here's where the Stoics remind us of the deeper order. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The obstacles that once drained you are no longer chains. They are lessons. They shaped the discipline that now fuels creation. Sovereignty without action rots into pride, but sovereignty wielded with purpose transforms into a force that builds, heals, and inspires. Let me share a picture. A woman who once drowned in gossip circles chose silence. For months she felt cut off, diminished, but slowly she poured her hours into painting. She sold her first canvas to a stranger online. Years later, her work filled galleries. The very people who dismissed her name now spoke it with respect. She never returned to defend herself. She didn't need to. Her work had become her voice. Her silence had become her signature. At this stage, the lesson sharpens. Walking away is not the end of the book. It is the preface. The real chapters are written afterward. In the mornings you rise early, in the rituals you refuse to skip, in the standards you live without compromise. True freedom is not measured by how far you run from what harmed you. It is measured by what you dare to build once you are free, so the journey bends toward its final truth. Respect is never earned by begging. It is never secured by noise. It is forged in distance, matured in silence, and proven by the life you construct on your own terms. You have become unshakable. And as the silence deepens into mastery, the question remains, not who failed to respect you, but who you will become now that you no longer wait for their permission. The distance you once feared to create has become the bridge to everything you now hold dear. Carry this lesson into every step ahead. When your worth is doubted, do not explain, do not beg, do not reopen doors that dishonor you. Close the gate with calm certainty and let silence speak for you. One day they will recognize their own emptiness, but by then you will be far ahead, walking with those who valued you from the beginning. Respect is born the moment you prove you can walk away and remain gone. If this message gave you strength, consider subscribing so we can keep walking this path together. Comment below with "walk away" to affirm your choice. Remember, your absence is not a loss, but a declaration of dignity. Keep moving forward. The next lesson is waiting for you.